A professional athlete just said some of the most disgusting anti-gay, anti-trans bull I have ever heard. And so far, he has faced 0 consequences. Like, his big money-making event is still set to take place, still at Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, and it's still in 2 days. So, TikTok? It might be time to do your thing. Let me tell you why. This human thumb, Sean Strickland, yeah, the guy in the Women Belong in the Kitchen t-shirt, so original. He is an MMA fighter. And yesterday, MMA journalist Alexander Lee asked him about disgusting comments he had made in the past about the LGBTQ community. Specifically that time that Strickland said if he had a gay son, it would mean he failed as a man. This seems like a guy who's super secure in his masculinity. Anyways, before Lee could even finish his question, Strickland launched into a gnarly tirade.
But when have you ever seen a UFC champion, George St. Pierre, or anybody else stick up for you guys? I can do it. I do it. I am not chasing the Chinese check mark of Nike. I don't give a about that. I care about you guys. I care about you guys being free. I care about you guys having freedom of speech. I give about you guys. And I'll tell you what, you guys are awesome, and I cannot wait. And this man fucking go to war for you guys. Let's go.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about UFC, as UFC 297 was last night. And although Trump did not show up, okay, like he has in the last few big UFC fights in which, you know, he had massive standing ovations, something special happened at UFC 297, which took place in Canada, as Trudeau chants rang out in the arena, which was a special moment, to say the least. Take a look.
Young Jamie. Fuck Trudeau.
I was at the UFC.
Yelling, fuck Trudeau.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
That guy's
Canada,
a piece of shit.
Canada, get your shit together. Come back. Come back to what you used to be. That Pierre Poilievre guy, however you say his name, that guy makes sense.
He's also Fidel Castro's kid. We know. I'm not a big conspiracy guy.
I don't know if
Come on.
true.
Come on. Eddie, back me up on this. Educate him.
It's not that crazy. It's not that crazy.
He looks
his
a
mom,
lot like Castro.
Look at
his
the
mom.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Thank you, sir.
Realistically, I've looked at this. He also looks like his dad. His dad looks like Castro. His dad's very similar in facial structure to Castro.
But explain the mom going to
hanging
Cuba.
out, and he's got
9 months before he's born.
Fidel's holding him. Going,
That's why it's fun. That's why it's a fun theory.
And she's on the flight logs so many times.
This could all be solved with a very simple DNA test. With if I would do, if someone was accusing my dad of being Castro, if someone said, hey, your grandfather was Mussolini, I'd be like, no. What are you talking about? Yeah, look, your grandma fucked Mussolini. You think your grampy, the guy that used to take you fishing, you think that was your grandfather? No, your grandfather was Mussolini. I'd be like, no.
And
I would
then,
have to find
and then
out.
they showed you a picture.
Then
they showed you a picture of Mussolini holding you. You'd be like, "Oh shit, it's looking pretty great."
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that, okay? Trudeau chants rang out at UFC 297, and again, it was a pretty glorious moment. Now, leading up to UFC 297, there was a lot of controversy going into the main card fight between Mr. Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis. And a lot of the drama was not about the fight itself, okay? It was actually about Sean Strickland and his comments on social and political issues, because he was prompted by a reporter to talk about LGBTQ, in which all of you guys know and should remember that it did not go too well for the woke reporter that asked Mr. Sean Strickland about a topic that, again, has absolutely nothing to do with the fight.
Yeah. Sean, we were talking before about how you have so much respect from your teammates, from peers. You said you've had great interaction with fans pretty much all the time. I did want to ask, you know, you're in Toronto. Welcome. Glad to hear it. It's been great.
Are you Canadian?
Of course I am.
Are you part of the opposition? Are you?
I don't know how to phrase that.
I mean, you got like, yeah.
Well, I did want to ask.
Did you vote for Trudeau?
You know, I'm not going to say.
And let me tell you something right now. If a man says he's not going to say, like, if you ask a motherfucker, did you vote for Biden? He's like, well, I'm not going to say. That's none of your business. He voted for Biden.
Sean,
so hey,
Sean, I'm glad you've had great experiences.
So this is what I'm talking about, you guys. The enemy of Canada. All right.
That's what it's got to be. It's got to be. We've got a pretty supportive gay and lesbian community in this city. I did want to ask you about something you wrote a couple of years ago. You said, if I had a gay son, I would think I'd...
Oh, look, another. I'm saying to you, the swamp, you guys, the swamp.
You become a champion, you become a star, and someone says...
Let me ask you something. Are you gay?
Have you had the chance to interact with a more diverse...
Are you... Let me know. Are you gay?
Can I get an answer?
Well, no, I'm asking. This is the part. Are you a gay man?
I'm an ally of the community.
Okay. If you had a son and he was like, you had a son, he was gay, you'd be like, oh man, you don't want a grandkid?
No problem with it.
Oh man, well, dude, you're a weak man, dude. You're part of the problem. You elected Justin Trudeau. Like, when he sees the bank accounts, like, you're just pathetic. And the fact that you have no backbone, and has he shut down your country and seized bank accounts? You ask me some stupid shit like that, go yourself. Move the on, man.
Really, that doesn't really answer the question, but I did.
Yeah, so of course, like always, unsurprisingly, you had the liberal sports media, shows like the Dan Le Batard show, get their panties in a bunch over Sean Strickland's comments, essentially calling his comments hate and bigotry, homophobia, transphobia, and calling for either Dana White to essentially censor his fighters, or for Disney or ESPN to step in to make a statement against these fighters, and the fact that Dana White allows them to speak freely.
That is bullshit that we allow that. It's bullshit. And we can't ignore it. And we should. If there isn't going to be a punitive measure, let's move on. Move the fuck on.
But there can't be a punitive measure, Mike, if the person in charge doesn't feel anything in the way of pressure. Like, there has to be the outrage and the reaction to it. Now, I understand that the reaction these days to the outrage is to simply say, you're too sensitive. You want to cancel me. This isn't freedom, you being outraged by every little thing. But this kind of speech is not a little thing.
He's wearing a T-shirt that says, women go back in the kitchen. Well, like, what are we doing? Like that's not... Well, we haven't even touched on that. That's hatred of 40 years ago. We kind of got past that. And now we're just rehashing it because there has been a change. And it's the same people that asked for politics to be kept out of sports and have introduced this vile hatred into it while being platformed, while being legitimized, as the former president of the United States sits next to Dana White, the head of their company, at big marquee events. It's just, as it's on ESPN. I asked Jimmy Pitaro, what gonads are you going to show me in this instance? Because that pay-per-view is on ESPN+. That is on ESPN+. And I know Disney is an inclusive company. I worked for it. You say nothing? You know what? You were right, Dan. I'll walk it back. End of the segment. I have to change my mind on something. I'm glad you made us play that video. Because while the UFC isn't going to do anything about it, I would challenge ESPN to make a public statement on this. Because that kind of hate is going over their airwaves. The Walt Disney Company.
Yeah, so full soy boy meltdown there, right? And of course, the soy boy meltdown is not going to stop, as Dana White actually was confronted by a woke reporter on the so-called homophobic and transphobic comments being made by his fighters, and whether or not he was actually going to shorten the leash that he puts on his fighters, because apparently free speech means that he has given his fighters a long leash, and Dana White was not having any of that from the reporters. Take a look.
Did you ever consider going to those guys and saying, hey, this might be the one time you need to tone it down?
This might be the one time you need to what?
Tone it down, the trash talk.
I don't tell anybody to do anything. I don't try to control any other human beings in any way, shape, or form. They do it this way. I say it all the time. We're in the fight business, and, you know, if you get your feelings hurt that bad, you probably shouldn't ask the type of questions when you know the answer you're going to get from Strickland. Let's start there. You know what I mean? If you ask him, you know who he is, and if you ask him a certain question, he was baited in that question.
Well, I'm not, sorry, my mistake, not referring to that question, just, you know, Strickland got a little...
I know what you're saying.
Okay.
I know what you asked me. It is what it is. It's the fight business, man.
Dana, I just want to go back. You were talking about, like, you obviously give a long leash to your fighters about, you know, what they can say, when they are up there with the UFC microphone and you are getting into territory of homophobia, transphobia, like, is there...
I don't give anybody a leash.
Well, I'm saying you...
A leash?
I'm like...
Free speech. Control what people say. Going to tell people what to believe. Going to tell people... I don't fucking tell any other human being what to say, what to think, and there's no leashes on any of them. What is your question?
I was asking that question. I'll move on, though.
Yeah, probably a good idea. That's ridiculous to say I give somebody a leash. Free speech, brother. People can say whatever they want, and they can believe whatever they want. And I don't think there's any... We had two gay women who fought in the co-main event. They sat on the stage with Sean Strickland. They could give a shit what Sean Strickland thinks or what he says or what his beliefs are or what his opinions are. You know what I mean? Go ahead. What do you got?
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that, okay? Absolutely perfect response from Dana White as per the usual, okay? I know a lot of people may not see Dana White as their cup of tea, but I actually really do think that from a personality standpoint, he is the perfect person to lead an organization like the UFC, okay? Because if you had somebody with a lot less cojones to take on the liberal media and the establishment and didn't want to stand on principles like free speech, I think the UFC would be ran a lot more like, I don't know, the NFL, right? Or the NBA, okay? Where, you know, the athletes are only allowed to be woke, okay? They're not allowed to be not woke. They're only allowed to be woke, okay? And wokeness has consequences, okay? I mean, when you had the anti-police rhetoric happening in this country coming from these athletes, the woke mainstream liberal media wasn't concerned about the consequences and the ramifications of that, even though there was real world violence that was occurring because of that type of rhetoric. But when it comes to, you know, an athlete being baited into answering a question about something that has absolutely nothing to do with the fight, the mainstream liberal media wants to act shocked and surprised that the fighter comes out and says something that everybody knows that he was going to say about an issue, right? He's not on board with the woke agenda, and it is what it is, okay? It doesn't matter if you cry homophobia, bigotry, transphobia, whatever. It doesn't matter how much you cry about it. The fighter has a right to feel the way he feels, and if you don't like him saying the things that he's saying, then don't ask him questions that will prompt him to say anything like that, right? But when you talk about a sport like the UFC, this is the most testosterone-filled sport that there is, okay? I mean, this is not for the weak, okay? This is not for high estrogen men. This is not for low T men, okay? If you can't handle a sport like the UFC and what comes along with fighting, then you should not be a reporter, right? Don't be a reporter. Don't watch it. Don't consume any of the content because it's clearly and obviously not marketed for you. It's not marketed for low T, high estrogen men that are concerned about comments of hate and bigotry and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Dana White has said, look, I am not going to endorse a certain type of speech. I'm going to allow all my fighters to speak freely, regardless of whether or not I agree or disagree with their free speech. And that's the thing that I love about the UFC that I think these other sports organizations don't do, because like I told you guys, it's totally fine to be woke, right? If you're in the NFL or the NBA, you'll be praised for it, right? But as soon as you start taking right-leaning positions, right, you come out and you're anti-woke or you go against the establishment, they're going to try to shut you down. All of a sudden, it's a problem. It's an issue, okay? So, you know, I think that in situations like this, you know, Dana White is a guy that is leading by example. He's saying, look, this is my business. I run my business the way that I want to run my business. And him allowing his fighters to speak freely and to say all the controversial things that makes the mainstream liberal media clutch their pearls, that's why the business is so successful, right? That's why the business is so successful. That's why he's so successful, okay? Because that's what people want to see. It's raw, right? It ain't pretty. It makes you uncomfortable. But that's the point, right? That's who it's marketed towards. Men that can handle that type of stuff. And if you can't handle that type of stuff, then don't watch it. Don't report on it. And if you don't want to hear hateful comments, then don't ask fighters comments that will prompt them to say something hateful, right? It's really that simple. But the last thing that you need to do is to try to call for Dana White to put a quote-unquote leash on his fighters because he's allowing his fighters to speak freely. when asked questions by the mainstream liberal media, because, again, you know that if Sean Strickland comes out and says, I support the LGBTQ community, et cetera, right? If he does the tap dance, these reporters wouldn't be asking Dana White, oh, why are you not putting a leash on your fighters in regards to them being able to talk about these subjects? They only need a leash when they're going against the left-wing agenda, when it doesn't align with the establishment and what they want, right? Again, it's pretty fascinating to see how these things unfold. But again, shout out to Dana White for once again standing up to these people, okay, not folding to the pressure to essentially censor his fighters, which in my opinion would hurt his business model. His business model is successful because he's allowing the sport to be raw, uncut, and as testosterone filled as possible, which is the key to success in this sport, right? In this industry. So, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.